Okay. Should we go ahead and begin?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Okay, thank you guys very, very much for coming today. Huge thanks to the organizers. We're quite excited to be here today. Today, we're going to be talking about a new field of study called Language Education for Sustainable Development, or LESD. And today, we're going to be talking about best practice guide in the language classroom. We hope to share sort of what LESD looks like in action. So I'll be sharing a little bit as well as Harika. And we're hoping to introduce you to SCOPE, which is sort of a framework for using this in the classroom itself. Whoops, hang on a second. Okay.
Technical problem.
I have to, sorry guys, one second here.
Maybe you have to continue here first.
Yeah, I have to push continue.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, let me backtrack here. Okay, sorry. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background. Harika's going to talk about LESD and the Sustainable Development Goal 3. I'll talk about LESD and SDG 13 and the conclusion. So for those of you, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this before. If you have any guesses, please put your guesses in the chat window. What you are actually looking at is each stripe is 1 year. And this is actually for the region of Japan. It starts in 1901 and goes to 2019. And what you're seeing is the global average temperature. This is some brilliant work done by Ed Hawkins that he took from Berkeley Earth, some of the data that he collected. And essentially what you're seeing is that last 20 years, the red part, I don't know if it's on the right or left hand of your screen, is the last 20 years. 5 of which have been the hottest years ever recorded. So what we're facing is enormous sort of global challenges. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to incorporate those into a language classroom. So here, let me introduce you to Yuta. Yuta can be any student. So he's going to be one of my Japanese students, for example. And Yuta is going to be growing up in a world that's going to be faced with global warming, poverty issues that are associated with global warming, and an increasing population. We live more and more in an interconnected world, right, due to globalization. So Yuta is going to have to be able to live in this kind of world and communicate with other peoples, cultures, societies. And of course, we're facing a global pandemic, which is relatively new for our generation. But this is something that is going to happen more often, possibly in the future, if we continue down the same path that we're on. So what is language education for sustainable development? So what we're essentially doing is we're taking the best of language education. As you can see on the left-hand side here, this is taken from Nation, but sort of the 4 fundamental strands of language education, right? Input, output. We've got fluency development and deliberate study. And essentially what we want out of language education right now, the main goal is to get students to be proficient language learners at some future point. But the last sort of 10, 20, 30 years has shown us that we have these enormous global issues, and we really need to do more in the language classroom, right? We're not preparing our students for the future. Language education does a good job at preparing our students to communicate, but we also need this sort of idea of education for sustainable development, which essentially is taking our students, challenging their values, beliefs, and norms around these major issues, and giving them the tools to sort of deal with them in substantial ways. So what LESD essentially is sort of fundamentally thinking about the goals of language education as quite different. So just to give you a little background about what ESD is for those that are unfamiliar, essentially there's this idea of the values, beliefs, norms model. Brossman, Cisternas, Lopez, and Della Mea have developed this, and I've used this quite a lot in some of the research that I've done. Essentially, what we want from people is a change in behaviors, right? So if we think about something like carbon footprint, we want people in their daily lives to change and sort of decrease their carbon footprints in all sorts of ways. We also want governments to do that, but let's look at the personal carbon footprint at this point in time. The VBN model essentially sets up this idea that we've got all of this knowledge, right, which is sort of the biospheric, egoistic, altruistic, this new ecological paradigm, which is really like the basic content knowledge that we're teaching people. And what we're doing with the values, beliefs, norms model is we're challenging students so that they start understanding the consequences of these things. If they buy a new iPhone, for example, right, what is the consequences of that? What kind of carbon does that produce? Should I be buying one every single year, for example? Then we've got this idea of ascription of responsibility. So who is responsible? If I do buy a new iPhone, am I responsible for that carbon that's produced from the phone? Is Apple or Samsung or whoever it's from? You can actually think about this VBN model as sort of like a evolution, if you will, right? So these sort of things go in order in terms of challenging or critical thinking is what we commonly call it in language education. The last component is this personal norming, having students actually say, I believe you should recycle. And then the hope is these behaviors will happen, right? So norming is sort of the final step in that. The behaviors follow that action. Now, I should say here, LESD is not, the goal of a course in LESD is not to change people's behaviors. That's impossible. Or a course of study is not to change behaviors. What we are going to do, though, is do all that stuff in the middle, right? We're challenging the beliefs of students, their values around them, and then their norms. And hopefully at a future time, they make their own decisions on the behaviors that they think are appropriate. So we take our students, we apply this sort of concept or framework of LESD, and we get two things. We get these behavior change at the end of the day, or we hope, right, through this VBN model, and we get proficient language learners that can communicate these ideas with other people in the world. So how we do this, of course, you guys have, hopefully most of you have seen this before. It's quite common in Japan, for example, where we're starting to see trains that are decorated with the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we are only going to show you a quick snapshot because we're limited on time. Harika is going to talk about SDG 3, which is about good health, and I'm going to talk about climate action. And then we're going to be talking about it through this sort of basic fundamentals of LESD, which is scope. Harika is going to talk about two aspects of it, and I'm going to talk about two aspects of it from my course. Of course, a good LESD course is going to have elements of all of these involved in it. So I'm going to give it over to Harika.
Hello, everyone. Now I'm going to talk about SDG 3 and how this course can help support this SDG. So let's start with the definition of SDG 3. It's very simple and obvious, good health and well-being, but it's important to define health because we adults even have misconceptions about this. So this goal is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all people at all ages. But what is exactly health? According to WHO, health is a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being. This part is especially important, and not just absence of pain and disease. And especially, I'm sure you can resonate when you were at university, how supported it was, your mental and social well-being. I personally felt I needed a lot more support, and English classes could be a place to bring that support. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And one reason this is important is non-communicable diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes, as you may already have heard. These are one of the biggest burdens worldwide on health systems, economically and emotionally and mentally. And less than half of the world's population, this is from the WHO website, has actually access to health services. In Japan, we are lucky, but in a lot of the other parts of the world, again, this would be a great place to help prevention through English classes. So you may be thinking, well, we need to do a lot at the policy level, like social and environmental factors are huge in changing these problems, right, and non-communicable diseases. To prevent them, we need a lot more effort than individual effort. But these areas are first underinvested, and individual responsibility and action are required. And actually, it is very important because it starts with us and it spreads into the communities. If somebody changes the diet or health lifestyle, exercise habits, other people will be affected. All right. So, relevance to this SDG, how is this course going to support students' mental, physical, social well-being? The goal is to reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases because there is a need to change the current culture, how we consume, how we eat, how we move, how much we move. And this is very important and connected to climate change, actually. And one of the most important things we can do as teachers is to help students make lifestyle changes. And actually, I think teaching this as in the classroom as teachers also impact our lives. I learned a lot by teaching this, how to change your lifestyle, because you're constantly teaching and experimenting and learning. And I think this is one of my biggest passions. Like, education has to include a holistic approach. This is, I think, also connected to quality education SDG. We need to make sure we are giving them the students the tools to support their well-being, because it's very important for their success and the community. All right. So this course that I've designed to achieve this goal was called, at first, Life Skills for Health, Happiness, and Success. And then I realized that knowing all the necessary things about health, what to do, is not enough, and I need to emphasize behavior change. So I started to dig in, do more research, and started to find ways and strategies, science-based strategies, to help my students change their behaviors to build a healthier lifestyle. And the context was several Japanese universities. It was a CLIL course. It was elective, CFR B1 plus 2 B2 level, year 2 and year 4 students. And the content was completely science-based from different top universities, such as Yale, Princeton, Stanford University courses. And it was based on modern psychology, neuroscience, behavior change, and what else? Yeah, basically cognitive science also. Of course, this is a language course, so there were 4 skills: listening, reading, speaking, and vocabulary support. And as for assessment, this is where the fundamentals of LESD comes in. Of course, all of them were covered in the classroom, but I'm going to talk about specifically how the course was student-centered. So I kind of flipped the classroom, especially in the last couple semesters. So students study the materials and come ready with notes and questions. So students play a very active role. I used to teach it in the classroom, but now I changed it in a way that they prepare more. And they take notes, bring questions, discuss ideas, do a lot of self-reflection. They then choose health behaviors and strategies to experiment with. This is all under student covered. And then they evaluate their beliefs about their health, their current health behaviors, how healthy they are. This is to raise self-awareness and challenge some of their old beliefs. And they synthesize ideas from the course to find solutions to their problems and experiment with the behavior change strategies towards a healthier lifestyle. So, lessons learned. So this one is actually obvious. I can also resonate with this one. I don't know how it was for you at university. What did you eat? How much did you move? Did you care about your health as much as you do now? As we get older, we understand the importance of self-care more, but teenage habits tend to stick, and a lot of teenagers tend to focus on their studies or social activities, and they tend to neglect their health. Most people, this is new science, so are unaware of the cognitive bias and how to change the behavior. So they are not able to build a healthy lifestyle. This is also difficult because as I dived into the science, I understand that we need support in changing behaviors, especially health behaviors are really difficult to change. All right, so how is this going to help Utah? So in this difficult health environment with COVID and climate change, Utah is going to be more aware of his values, beliefs, and will have more reliable information about latest science-based health pillars, and will start to question his beliefs so that he can find out what to change and have the toolbox to change. So this makes him more resilient and empowered to take a part in the climate solution. Because if you're healthy and you can manage your time and you can be more useful to the society, contribute more. And of course, this is going to help him refine his English skills so that he can participate in discussions about health and solutions to global climate change. So that's it for me. Josh, would you like to take over? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Harika. So as Harika was talking about, right, she's challenging students' values, beliefs, norms around health, right? And these things are very, very linked into the language part, how you communicate it, as well as the content. So I'm going to talk a little bit about climate action number 13. So this is to take action around climate change and its impacts. And I'm going to talk about a course that I've been teaching, a course that I've been teaching at Jodoin University for the last 3 years around Model United Nations. So MUN, if you're familiar with the United Nations model, this is a sort of a mock United Nations, if you will. And the students this year are going to a Japanese university model United Nations called Jumon. And SDG 9, 12, and 13 in particular, is part of this course. So of course, the students are involved in all sorts of different skills, right? They're communicating, negotiating, they're researching, they're writing draft resolutions and position papers. And each student has a country that they are responsible for, and they have to understand these problems in depth around their country and then communicate those ideas more broadly. So I'm going to focus on O and P in this case, offering feedback, practice, demonstrate, and knowledge. Of course, all of them are involved, but I'll just talk about those due to the time restraints that we have. Here, students are given the opportunity for peer, self, and teacher feedback. They write position papers, and those position papers, they get feedback from fellow students. They write, read them, give each other feedback. They give themselves a final mark for the course after I've given them written feedback. And then, of course, they have the opportunity to present and negotiate at Jumon, which is the Japanese University Model United Nations, where they are interacting with other students and they have an expertise. They understand their country's issues around climate change, SDG 13, and they have to be able to negotiate with other countries, talk about it, express their expertise and the information that they know about it. So back to Utah, how is this going to help him? Well, he's going to earn a deeper understanding of the issues around climate change and how these solutions work in the real world from a Model United Nations course. He's going to gain presentation skills and present ideas, persuasive, digestible ideas for audience of his peers through Jumon and through the classwork that we're doing. And of course, he's able to express these ideas in English, in this case, and improve his interpersonal and communication skills. So let's move on to the conclusion here. So these fundamentals of LESD, currently I'm writing a book about this, and I've produced some chapters and some publications already. And I'm trying to develop this as a new way of thinking about language education. So again, I think language education as it currently sits does a very good job at getting our students ready to use a language or be proficient at a language. But it's not meeting this other part, right? We have these major problems coming up. These students have to live in it. And it's really, really important that they can communicate these ideas well. So one of the things about LESD is that we need to move to these transformative teaching models where students are really, really involved in all of these different aspects and expressing themselves in a language, communicating their own cultural identities to other people in this sort of globalizing world that we live in. And then the SDGs as sort of fundamental content to use in a classroom, right? Again, challenging students' values, beliefs, and norms around these ideas and concepts. So again, we want Yuto to be able to communicate his ideas broadly in international contexts, right? Be able to participate in conversations, bring his social, cultural ideas, learn from people, bring it back to Japan, and then be able to have a solid understanding of these massive problems that we face. And again, the Sustainable Development Goals, they're not perfect, but they are really, really good place to start in terms of major global issues that need major solutions. So really thinking about the two goals of language education, changing that so that we're looking at these two different aspects of it, not just the language proficiency end of things. So again, thank you very, very much. I'm Josh Jodoin, and this is Harika, and we look forward to your questions. I guess we'll do questions at the end, or possibly, I think, at the end. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for listening.